Why does everything that used to make sense now feel false? Why is it that everything that once felt meaningful now rings hollow, suddenly tasting of falsehood? At what precise moment did the simple fact of living a normal life cease to be sufficient and begin instead to cause profound, aching pain? What if the discomfort you carry, that persistent, unnamed anxiety, were in fact not a flaw, but a powerful summons, a critical signal for realignment? The goal of life is to be normal, which is the aim of the unsuccessful, wrote Carl Jung. And perhaps you find yourself right at that juncture, exhausted by the constant pressure to pretend, drained by the forced smiles, walking through your days like an outsider observing a life that should be your own. You have become an utterly exhausted actor, endlessly reciting lines in a play you no longer believe in. Wake up, commute, work, perform superficial pleasantries, consume what the market mandates, adhere to invisible social rules, and simply endure the incessant noise. All of this is deeply draining, isn't it? Yet there is something far more corrosive than the routine itself. It is the performance of sanity, the act of pretending you are fine, the facade that suggests you still believe in the daily theater of your own life. Every one of us, at some quiet moment, has whispered the same question into the void. Have I gone mad, or has the world itself become fundamentally insane? What if the truth lies in both? What if the delusion we observe is collective, and your persistent, gnawing discomfort is the first vital sign of lucidity breaking through? This video is intended as a refuge, a sacred corner for anyone who has grown weary of the performance of composure. You are about to enter a conversation that transcends mere intellectual reasoning. It is a dialogue that cuts directly into the abyss between what you instinctively feel and what you have been relentlessly told you should feel. We will journey together without hurry through 5 interwoven chapters, 5 pillars of reflection that twist together like a feverish dream. By the end, you may not possess all the definitive answers, but you will discover something infinitely more valuable: the correct questions to guide you forward. Chapter 1: The Collapse of the Obvious. Have you truly recognized how the word normal has been weaponized, transformed into a kind of invisible, inescapable prison? It dictates your every move. Waking early, feigning readiness, replying to messages you despise, accepting invitations that hold no meaning, forcing laughter at tasteless jokes, chasing soulless trends, and accumulating possessions that fill no genuine void. This is the rigid mold of modern normalcy, a daily ritual of self-abandonment. And the most perverse aspect of this conditioning is that the moment you dare to question it, the world rushes in to convince you that you are the problem. You are isolating yourself too much, they whisper. You're overthinking, you're becoming strange. But this is not madness. This is the excess of lucidity. It is the powerful, inevitable beginning of the collapse of the obvious. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han writes compellingly that we now inhabit a society of achievement, where every individual is made personally responsible for their own failures. In this system, exhaustion and anxiety are no longer seen as symptoms of a sick structure, but as crippling personal defects. Within this relentless paradigm, the simple act of failing to tolerate normal life becomes a profound act of resistance, a spiritual rebellion against the machine. The routine, which should provide a foundation of solid ground, has become shifting quicksand. You wake up and are immediately overcome by an inexplicable fatigue, not physical, but a weariness of the soul. It feels like occupying a crumbling theater, desperately pretending the performance is ongoing, even as the very sets slowly disintegrate around you. Have you felt this specific ache? Smiling externally amidst a crowd, while screaming in silence internally? That is the moment something crucial breaks. Not outside, but deep within. And you realize, life is not merely difficult, it is unbearably superficial. Fyodor Dostoevsky famously declared that man needs suffering as much as he needs air. Yet the modern world is obsessed with anesthetizing everything: silence, boredom, sadness, doubt. We live in a perpetual state of intoxication fueled by constant distractions. Normalcy has devolved into a literal rat race, where anyone who dares pause to genuinely breathe is immediately trampled by those still deluded by the belief in a finish line. The so-called normal life molds you, slowly robbing you of your true voice. It starts by accepting small discomforts, graduates to denying your own deepest feelings, and culminates when you convince yourself that the resulting hollowness is simply maturity. But heed this warning. The void is not a sign of maturity. It is the muffled scream of a spirit that has been domesticated. That sensation of being completely out of place, of fundamentally not fitting in, is not a mark of weakness. It is the glorious symptom of a sensitivity that has miraculously survived the cultural onslaught. And this sensitivity is rare, it is dangerous, it is sacred. Friedrich Nietzsche said that what does not provoke a shock is not worth remembering. What could be more shocking, more seismically upsetting, than the realization that your entire life structure has been built upon someone else's expectations? The collapse of the obvious begins when you can no longer convincingly lie to yourself that everything is fine. When parties bore you to tears, conversations drain you, and formal gatherings assault your spirit with their empty pretense. When you instinctively choose the honest pain over the plastic, manufactured joy. It is at this breaking point that you perceive a stark truth. Normalcy is not just tiresome, it is toxic because it compels you to perpetually act, to adapt, to smile through gritted teeth while your soul is quietly hemorrhaging. And here lies the most uncomfortable truth of all. Normalcy is rigidly maintained by an unspoken pact of pretense. To deliberately break that pact is to instantly become a profound threat in the eyes of everyone else. You naturally withdraw, fall silent, observe, and begin the slow, deliberate work of rebuilding your reality from the inside out, with different rhythms, new priorities, and deeper personal truths. This marks the beginning of your psychic detoxification, and like any form of spiritual withdrawal, it is intensely painful. But there is an undeniable beauty to the pain that accompanies lucidity. There is a sacred purity in the discomfort of one who refuses to enter into a bargain with the false. That feeling you are experiencing, however much it resembles a breakdown, is quite possibly a birth. Chapter 2. The Psychic Exile. Now, there is something foundational you must grasp. The most insidious enemy is not external. It resides squarely within your mind. That self-sabotaging impulse, the paralyzing grip of anxiety, the emotional attachment that internally weakens you, all of it follows a defined pattern. Until you fundamentally restructure the mental model that fuels these reactions, the cycle will repeat relentlessly again and again. Yet a way exists to change this core foundation, utilizing cold logic, strategic consciousness, and rigorous emotional retraining exercises. We have prepared an essential resource showing you how to apply this method practically. You can begin that transformation immediately. Insert call to action / link placeholder for video code here. There is an anguish that remains nameless, a kind of existential exhaustion that is neither purely physical nor strictly emotional. It is best described as a psychic exile. You walk among people, yet you feel that some essential part of you is no longer truly present, as if your body occupies the now, but your soul has its bags permanently packed. This is not clinical depression, this is disagreement. You are fundamentally at odds with the world's values, its rhythms, and its ubiquitous masks. This deep internal discord is often tragically misdiagnosed as weakness. It is not weakness, it is a form of refined audition. It is as if your spirit is tuned to a frequency that the vast majority can no longer perceive. Alan Watts, in one of his most poignant meditations, suggested that the life we are sold is an immense musical number, and most people are too preoccupied with correctly executing the choreography steps to realize that they absolutely detest the music itself. Have you felt that? The sensation of being part of something you do not grasp, or worse, something you grasp all too well, and for that precise reason cannot endure? Ordinary life revolves entirely around manufactured goals, social status, relentless productivity, and pure distraction. But you have begun to perceive the subtle, sickening odor of the farce. You feel a knot tightening in your chest when you observe people racing after aims that, at their core, fill absolutely nothing. You grow exhausted merely contemplating the obligation to appear happy at all times. And then you begin to hear a summons, not with your physical ears, but with your chest, with your very core. A call that does not originate externally, not from gurus, not from motivational speeches, not from self-help books. It emerges from the invisible. It comes from that part of you that has no name, no gender, and no social function, yet it knows. It knows that the world screams so loudly only to hide what it is terrified of feeling. It knows that performative joy is often nothing more than a thin layer of varnish over a chronic spiritual sadness. It knows that there is something fundamentally terribly wrong with this structure we have been told is life. This summons pulls you inward, and the harder you try to force yourself to fit in, the more intensely you suffer. This is because the summons is not for adaptation, it is for awakening. It calls you to awaken to the reality that most people actively avoid looking at, that we live permanently anesthetized, that we have exchanged profound meaning for sheer efficiency, that we confuse the crushing weight of security with absolute spiritual imprisonment, and that we have utterly forgotten the taste of the simple because we are addicted to the debilitating excess. Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Yet the modern world has converted attention into a relentless commodity. Your capacity to simply be present has been stolen, and now, as you try to reclaim it, you feel like an alien, a profound stranger in your own existence. But listen closely. This is not a sign of maladjustment. It is the awakening. You are beginning to remember what is genuinely real. That feeling of not belonging is the absolute inverse of alienation. It is your spirit rejecting the superficial, yearning for depth, silence, and something that cannot be bought, published, or measured. You long for conversations that linger, for small, genuine gestures, for spaces where you can simply exist without the relentless pressure to prove anything. This is not spiritual weakness, it is a deep form of nostalgia for your own true self. Do not be surprised if, in this search, you start to withdraw. This is not isolation, it is gathering. It is the chrysalis moment, the cocoon where the false ego is dissolved and something far more authentic begins its difficult emergence. This necessary process is inherently solitary. The world applauds those who seamlessly adapt, not those who courageously awaken. They will brand you as strange, oversensitive, or disconnected. Let them, because it is within that silence, within that profound gathering, that you begin to hear what truly matters. The voice emerging from the invisible. The voice that declares with an uncanny calm, you are on the right path, even when everything external shouts the contrary. Jean-Paul Sartre famously declared that hell is other people, but sometimes hell is being among others and feeling that you have completely lost contact with your own soul. Heaven, perhaps, is that silent, discreet, invisible yet absolutely undeniable reconnection. And this call, this nameless nostalgia, is attempting to remind you you no longer belong here in the same way because you are finally beginning to belong to yourself. Chapter 3. The Simulation of Normalcy. There are days when everything appears to be functioning perfectly, yet nothing holds any sense of meaning. You completed all your tasks, paid the bills, responded to every message, performed exactly what was expected of you, only to be met by a cold, hollow silence, like someone reaching the top of a monumental staircase only to find there is no door. It is here that the most complex discomfort begins. Life, by all objective metrics, is working perfectly, yet you feel profoundly trapped in a simulation. And perhaps you are, not a technological simulation, like in a sci-fi film, but an emotional, cultural, and spiritual simulation, a meticulously choreographed theater where the paramount rule is to appear, never to be. Smile, produce, obey, publish, respond, express gratitude, even if deep down, your entire inner world is collapsing. Alan Watts consistently pointed out that we disastrously confuse the map with the territory, the representation with the actual lived experience. This is why, even surrounded by comfort, technology, and access, you feel further away from your true self than ever before. The surface of life has become pure spectacle, but the spectacle is exhausting, especially when the audience itself is merely pretending to be entertained. Have you observed how even conversations feel programmed? As if everyone is merely repeating prefabricated phrases, regurgitating copied opinions, and expressing generic outrage. It is a terrifying mirror game. Everyone reflects the other, yet no one truly looks at themselves. And so, we are steadily devoured by a routine centered solely on productivity and distraction. A life without pauses, without genuine presence, without depth. You wake up, check your phone, eat hastily, endure empty meetings, interact with absent people, and drown in notifications. And you call this life. But at night, when the noise finally subsides, that uncomfortable thought always returns. Is this truly all there is? The philosopher Jean Baudrillard termed this state hyperreality, a condition where the symbols and signs of reality hold more value than reality itself. The photograph of the meal matters more than the actual taste. The appearance of love matters more than intimacy. The idea of success matters more than inner peace. This is why people are utterly exhausted, even without having accomplished anything truly significant. Because living exclusively on the surface drains the soul, and a drained soul becomes inevitably cynical. Cynical about love, about faith, about beauty, cynical about the very meaning of being alive. You begin to feel a deep nostalgia for things you have never actually lived. Slow, unhurried conversations, long, meaningful gazes, work done with purpose, days without a screen, mornings without rushing. And you perceive that the modern routine was not designed for human beings, but for cogs in a machine. You were not born to be efficient, you were born to be whole. But the simulation does not desire whole beings. It prefers pieces, fragments, avatars, people who obey without question, consume without thought, and repeat without feeling. Therefore, when you begin to question, to withdraw, to seek genuine silence, the system inevitably retaliates. It begins to label you as lazy, demotivated, or disconnected. But you know deep down the truth. You are not disconnecting. You are simply trying to reconnect with something the world has forgotten. Here begins the true weariness, not the physical, but the existential fatigue, born from an excess of stimulation and a devastating lack of meaning. It is the paradox of being full and simultaneously starving. And this struggle is not unique to you. It is a collective collapse of significance. It is the high price paid for living in a world where everything is visible, yet almost nothing is true. But there is still a way out. Not easy, not quick, but profoundly possible. It begins when you choose to drop the script, when you stop performing, and when you allow yourself not to know, not to want, and not to fulfill every perceived obligation. In that space of fracture, something entirely new begins to breathe. An unlived life, a nameless desire, a thirst that no routine can ever quench. And perhaps this is precisely what you are feeling now. It is not exhaustion with the world. It is a thirst for the real. Chapter 4. The Healing in the Silence. There comes a point when the noise becomes utterly unbearable. I am not referring merely to the physical noise, cars, notifications, hurried voices, but to that far more insidious, intimate noise. The roar of invisible demands, the relentless acceleration of thoughts, and the crushing guilt of not being constantly useful. It is in this specific, silent fatigue that the soul's most ancient desire is born, to remain in silence. But not an empty silence. This is a fertile silence, saturated with presence, like the forest before the rain, or the wordless pre-dawn hours between two people who love each other without the need for explanation. Perhaps this is why you feel such an intense urge to retreat, to be in nature, to take off your shoes and feel the damp earth, to sip coffee slowly as the sun rises, to listen to a bird's song, and for the first time not attempt to interpret it, but simply hear it. That is not flight. It is return. The modern soul is not weary from doing things. It is exhausted from doing things without meaning. And that is why nature begins to call with its language of no words, with its deliberate cadence that never rushes for anything. The tree does not try to prove its usefulness. The flower does not hurry to open. Yet everything fulfills a purpose that escapes human control but never escapes harmony. You feel that call, don't you? To turn off the phone, to vanish for a few days, to finally hear your own thoughts, and then to go beyond them, to finally return to feeling what you feel without intermediaries, without filters, without performance. This is where silence becomes the ultimate cure, because it returns you to your core self. Thomas Merton asserted that contemplation is the answer to the deepest question of the human soul. How does one live? And contemplation only takes root in silence, in the non-doing, in the non-having, in the simple act of being. But this seems absurd in a world where a person's value is ruthlessly measured by their productivity. This is why silence is terrifying, because in it, there are no applause, no likes, no goals. There is only you. Naked, whole, exposed to the reality that has always been there, but which the noise carefully concealed. In silence, you realize that much of what you believed was necessary was merely noise. The new clothes, the opinions of strangers, the rush, the fear of missing out. All of it begins to crumble before the sheer, pure presence of a single, genuine moment. And it is in this sacred space that the divine whispers, not in the scandal of performative religion, but in the subtle detail of existence, in the rising smoke of tea, in the smell of the earth after rain, in an embrace that requires no words. You begin to understand that presence, the real presence, is not something to be sought externally. It is what happens when you fully allow yourself to inhabit your own body again, and then the world decelerates, time dilates, you breathe deeper. The anxiety begins to dissolve, not because anything changed externally, but because for the first time in a very long time, you are here, complete. Many are undertaking this silent journey now, trading excess for essence, noise for listening, the demanding multitude for communion, not with everyone, but with the few who see you with clean eyes. That is why small rituals become sacred, lighting a candle, reading a psalm, walking among trees, praying before sleep. These gestures are not trivial. They are anchors. They are ways to remember every single day that you are not here merely to function. You are here to feel, to be, to witness the miracle of being alive, even when everything appears fractured. And perhaps this is what your soul is truly searching for. Not answers, nor certainties, nor guarantees, but the courage to stop running, to quiet yourself, and to trust that even amidst the chaos, there is undeniable beauty in the simple act of breathing. Chapter 5. The In-Between Place. Perhaps you are standing exactly at this point in the middle of the bridge, neither fully beyond nor completely here. It feels like crossing a bridge at night without knowing what lies on the other side. You sense you can never return, yet you have no solid ground upon which to tread. This is the strangest space of the journey, the in-between place, el entre-lugar. It is here that you no longer recognize yourself in the clothes you used to wear, in the conversations you used to hold, in the desires that once drove you. But you also do not yet know who you are transforming into. Do not be afraid. This profound discomfort is a sign of transition, not of failure. You are living the necessary mourning for a life that no longer fits you, and that pain is as real as any farewell. Even when we say goodbye to a prison, we still weep, because the prison was familiar, and the new world is terrifyingly unknown. Alan Watts often said that life is like a dance, not a pilgrimage toward a final destination. But who taught us how to dance with the void, with the raw uncertainty, with the sensation of floating between two worlds that do not touch? And yet, it is precisely here in this vacuum between worlds that you begin to hear something new. A voice that does not shout, does not impose, but is there like a cool breeze, like an ancient echo that whispers, "You are exactly where you are meant to be." The harsh truth is that the old world is dying. You feel it in the artificial relationships, in the culture that normalizes the superficial, in the pasteurized spirituality that alienates more than it connects, in the fake smiles, in the prefabricated speeches, and in the rush that atropella presence. That world is sinking, and trying to adapt to it is akin to rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. But this does not mean the new world has fully emerged. It is still fragile. It is being slowly gestated in silences, in real encounters, in small invisible rituals, safe from the gaze of the market. It is arising wherever there is truth, wherever there is genuine listening, wherever there is pause. And in this in-between space, you have a critical mission. It is not to fix the ancient world or to hastily rush the new one. It is to keep the flame lit, to keep the heart open even when it aches, to keep the sensitivity alive even when the world seems insensible, to hold on to faith, not as a certainty, but as the raw courage to remain. Yes, there will be loneliness, but this solitude is also sacred. It is within it that you meet who you genuinely are, not who the world expected you to be. Yes, there will be doubts, but as Rainer Maria Rilke instructed, live the questions now. Perhaps gradually, without noticing it, you will live your way into the answer. You are not here by accident. This profound discomfort burning in your chest is not a curse, it is a compass. While the world screams, keep whispering. While everything rushes, stay slow. While many harden their hearts, keep your chest vulnerable. Because in the end, when the old world has finally perished, what will remain is what has always been true: real love, living presence, and the awakened soul. And you, yes, you, will be like a single candle burning brightly in the deep darkness. Not to illuminate everything, but simply to prove that the light still exists. Perhaps you still lack all the answers. Perhaps you do not even know precisely what you are searching for. But one thing is terrifyingly clear. You can no longer endure pretending that everything is fine in a world that is internally crumbling. And this is a rare gift, because the majority remains asleep with open eyes, smiling with extinguished souls, running without knowing what they are running from. But you stopped. You questioned. You began to listen to the powerful discomfort residing deep in your chest. And that discomfort, painful as it is the only bridge to something real. What you are feeling is not a defect, it is alignment. It is sensitivity in a world that cultivates anesthesia. It is consciousness in a culture that venerates distraction. You are between two worlds, and that demands courage. Courage to continue loving. Courage to decelerate when everything around screams for speed. Courage to keep your soul open even when your body begs for protection. So the next time you feel you do not belong to this world, remember, perhaps you are being called to help create another. I remember a night when I sat on the floor of my room, lights off, only a single candle burning, and a silence so thick it felt as if time had ceased. It was after an ordinary day, one of those where life appeared functional, but internally one felt they were collapsing. I looked at the candle and asked myself, is this all there is? Wake up, produce, smile, and repeat until death? It was that night, in that desperate quiet, that something within me began to shift. It was not a miraculous explosion. It was more like a whisper, a simple reminder that I was still there, that my soul was still breathing, even beneath the rubble of normalcy. And if you are here with me now, listening to this, reading this, feeling this, it is because perhaps that same flame that nearly died in me also fiercely burns within you. Fragile, but vividly alive. Thank you for allowing this conversation to exist. Thank you for not giving up on feeling. Thank you for not having turned to stone. This channel, this space, this voice exist only because you still believe there is something beyond the surface. If you want to know how others achieved that stable mind that nothing and no one can shatter, click now on the link in the description or the first pinned comment. The content is available for a limited time. Now, if you have reached this point, you have two options. You can close the video and return to the loop of normal life, pretending none of this ever happened, or you can subscribe, leave your comment, and share this with someone who, like you, is flirting with lucidity at 3 in the morning. And this is not for the algorithm, it is for relief. Perhaps your words will save the day for someone at the bottom of the well, who does not know that the bottom is sometimes the best place to hear the call from above. By the way, there are 2 videos appearing here on the side now. Do not click if you only want distraction. They are not light viewing. One of them speaks of something you feel but have never had the courage to name. The other perhaps will frighten you, but in the best possible way. Choose carefully. Lucidity exacts its price, but sometimes it is the only path still worth taking. Amen.